My favorite honorary quote-unquote lesbian, Drake, has taken somewhat of a downturn in music quality throughout his last few projects.
Who let Drake rap like he's from the UK?
But for the past few albums, it's felt like he's had trouble doing that, or as if he's struggling to be vulnerable for the entirety of a record.
This ain't even summer vibes.
Top 5 is Drake, 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 Drake.
Cause nobody was teaching that. The best westerns.
The recently released Her Loss back in November of 2022 definitely restored some of my faith in him, but it also made me contemplate what brought me to be so pessimistic about him in the first place. And I believe it all started way back with If You're Reading This, It's Too Late.
Enemies, got a lot of enemies, got a lot of people trying to drain me up.
The mixtape, released all the way back in February of 2015, is a project that I would classify as his greatest ever project, although massive respect to both Take Care and Nothing Was the Same. With If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, I find Drake at his most locked in and when I believe he garnered the most respect. It felt like he built heavily off of the momentum that 0 to 100 had gotten with more personal and heavier lyrics. The project is Drake at his most genuinely relatable he's ever been. Songs like Star 67, Energy, Know Yourself, and You and the Six are some of the realest songs he's ever produced, giving us some insight into the struggles he endured while on the road to stardom. However, my personal favorites off the tape are Six Man and Six God. Both songs boosted his status as a rapper in my eyes and were the songs that made me recognize Drake as one of the best artists within the modern generation. I remember that in 2015 everyone repped Drake as their favorite rapper and things were looking extremely optimal for the continuation of Drake's career. And then the whole Quentin Miller situation happened. Now it did result in the creation of one of the best diss tracks I've ever heard in back-to-back, derived from the Meek Mill versus Drake situation, but overall this was a very interesting sequence of events, which still has ramifications to this day. I'm not particularly surprised that Drake would have help writing lyrics. I think a lot of big artists have ghostwriters that we just aren't exposed to hearing about. But an artist of Drake's size and the caliber of project that was If You're Reading This, It's Too Late definitely raised some eyebrows. Back when this first came out and when I first heard about the situation, I definitely considered it to be a bit whack, but considering we now live in a generation where you can have little to no musical ability and still produce songs that perform well on the Billboard charts and do well in terms of sales and streams, I don't think Drake having a ghostwriter is all that bad, especially considering how good the project that he released with a ghostwriter was. Yet, due to this controversy, it seems like Drake has decided to take a step away from making a similar project to If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. Now it could be to try and distance himself away from the speculation about his writing ability, but some have also speculated that he simply can't write another album like it because Quentin Miller was so quintessential to its success. All I know for sure is that I'm quite disappointed with some of the projects that released afterwards, barring a couple exceptions that I'll point out. The indication of Drake's change came with the release of Hotline Bling in 2016.
When you need my love, I know when that hotline bling.
The closest way I can describe how I feel about Hotline Bling is as if it was Christmas Day and Santa had come down the chimney, gave me a toy, and then decided to take that toy and smack me over the head with it. It's a catchy song, it was super viral upon release, and in terms of sales, I'm sure Drake made tons of money off of it. However, it felt like the antithesis of everything his previous project was and is. I feel like this notion sort of continued into the creation of Views. I'm of the opinion that Views is an underappreciated album. Pop Style, Child's Play, and Feel No Ways are pretty good songs, but Views was definitely the start of the shift that we would see in Drake. With Views, the issues that I have are more or less that it isn't that interesting of a project beyond a few one-off songs. One Dance off the album was a massive hit, amassing nearly 2.5 billion streams on Spotify, but not really sure if anyone listens to One Dance anymore outside of certain clubs at certain hours. People definitely don't listen to Hotline Bling anymore. With this situation though, I think that Views is definitely a minor offender. A lot of people seem to consider Views to be a lot worse of an album than I personally think it is, but it isn't outstandingly great either. Now, I was super hyped up for Scorpion. Nice for What is a top-tier Drake song, and the good vibes off of God's Plan really set me up to believe that Drake was going to drop a classic album.
God's plan, God's plan.
Then I'm Upset came out and I kind of lost all hope. The song kind of sucked any sort of hype that I had towards the album. But then the Pusha T drama happened, and Duppy Freestyle was pretty good, I thought. So when Drake hadn't responded back to Push, I thought he would have some words to say on the album, but besides some subliminals here and there, I was wrong. And with Scorpion, I think it had all the ingredients to be a really top tier album. Nice for What and God's Plan banged, of course. I really enjoyed Survival, Nonstop, Emotionless, Sandra's Rose, and Mob Ties as well. I just feel conceptually this album was all over the place. I was expecting there to be more of a personal arc to the album due to the surrounding circumstances around the reveal about Drake having a son or pushing back at Pusha T, but besides a couple of bars off of a couple of tracks, there was no cohesive theme or story. That disappointment might be down to my own expectations, but when you have songs like Emotionless and Survival where you feel Drake start to get into things that are affecting him within his career, I wanted more of that. It jumps around from being upbeat to downbeat and just comes across as confusing to me, and I'm not really sure what he was going for. If he had something to say, message-wise, as a fan, I wish he would have gone more in depth and said it more clearly so we can get a picture into his perspective. Again, it's not a bad project and it has good songs, but overall, it felt kind of like a disjointed effort and was overall really disappointing for me. I'm not going to go too far in depth on Dark Lane Demos or More Life. To me, they felt like compilations that purposefully didn't have a cohesive structure to them. Blem and Portland were good songs, and I wish they were on Views, and Chicago Freestyle is more of what I like to hear from Drake. I felt like with both Certified Lover Boy and Honestly Nevermind, the same sort of trends were reoccurring that I wasn't a huge fan of. Drake would drop, he'd have a couple of good individual songs off the album that would stream really well, he'd be at the top of the charts for a couple of weeks, and then for a majority of the songs, they'd exit my rotation. Certified Lover Boy once again felt like it was trying to do so many things at once. If it was a joke album like on Way Too Sexy, double down on it. If it was a serious album like with Fair Trade, double down. With Honestly Nevermind, it kind of had the opposite issue where I understand it's more of a dance record, but it feels very quickly thrown together, more like a small EP than a full-fledged album. I know there were some rumors that it was released as an album due to some label disputes, but I can't seem to find any solid sources to back that up. Her Loss was somewhat of a return to form for me with Drake. A lot of people have put down the success of the album to how great 21 Savage comes across in a lot of the songs, but I think Drake carries his weight quite well too.
Do your thing, 21, do your thing.
Drake aired out a lot of grievances across this album, and whether you approve or disapprove of it, at least it was a lot more interesting than some of his other projects, and added that spice of controversy. I think the nature of 21's musical style made it so that Drake would go with more darker and heavier tones and more serious lyrics, which was somewhat reminiscent of some of the tracks off of If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, and was probably one of the reasons why I liked it more. The project overall feels a lot more cohesive. I understand the vibe Drake is going for with more dark and gritty undertones, and it works. I hope it continues. It's interesting to think about the aftermath of the Quentin Miller drama. In this situation, no one really benefited. Quentin himself can't seem to break back into the music scene and lost his connection to Drake from all the drama, even though all he did was help write good songs. Drake constantly has to combat being labeled as a rapper who has a ghostwriter, which results in situations like with Meek Mill and Pusha T taking shots at him. Hell, even Meek Mill was basically blackballed due to the aftermath of Back to Back, up until him and Drake made up again. So, who really benefited in it being leaked that Drake had a ghostwriter? The fans sure didn't. I believe that if things had been left alone, Quentin Miller could have potentially still been helping Drake write songs, and if they were the same quality as the ones off of If You're Reading This, It's Too Late, then we could have received something better quality from Drake than some of the other projects he released that were somewhat underwhelming.
You know, I mean, I worked with somebody on, I think, 4 or 5 songs on that record. I pulled my weight when it came to my pen. It wasn't like I just, you know, it wasn't like I needed somebody to facilitate, you know, entire ideas. We worked together.
Drake alleged that If You're Reading This, It's Too Late only took 6 weeks to make, so I can't imagine what him working with Quentin for 6 months on a project would have resulted in. I guess we'll never know. It's not all doom and gloom though. Her Loss was a resounding success and a big win for my feelings towards Drake's music. If Drake continues in this sort of vein, he can definitely restore my faith in him as a killer artist. I just hope that in the future we can avoid more bars about him being a lesbian.
Yo, you Pete, you made a fool out of me.